uterotonics, that is, they increases the tone of the uterine muscles, so they are known as uterotonics. So oxytocins are also called as uterotonics, and they usually cause uterine contractions, and the drugs that comes under the oxytocins or drugs that comes under the uterine stimulants are oxytocins, ergot derivatives like ergotamine, methyl ergometrine, and another one is prostaglandin, which includes prostaglandin E2, prostaglandin F2 alpha, as well as misoprostol. So these oxytocics are those drugs which causes contraction of the uterine muscles, and they help in expulsion of the fetus during the labor. So by contracting the uterine muscle, they will help in expulsion of the fetus. So these oxytocics are used to induce or they are used to augment the contraction during the delivery or at various stages of labor. So they will help in induction of the labor, or they will help to increase the contraction of the uterine muscles during the labor or during the delivery or at different stages of labor. There are stage 1, stage 2, stage 3 uh, stages of labor, and during various stages of labor they will help the uterus to contract. So they are useful to restrict the extended pregnancy. So besides contracting the uterus and help in delivery of the fetus, they are also useful to restrict the extended pregnancy. For example, if a pregnant female is of 40 weeks of gestational period, if still after reaching to 40, after crossing the 40th weeks of gestational period, or after reaching to 41 week of gestational period, and still patient is not having any uterine contraction, then to induce the labor or to induce the contraction of the uterus, we can give oxytocin. So it is also useful to restrict the extended pregnancy as well. And these oxytocins are also used to minimize the postpartum hemorrhage, that means excessive bleeding after delivery of the child. That is known as postpartum hemorrhage. That is the hemorrhage that occurs after delivery of the child is known as postpartum hemorrhage. So to minimize the postpartum hemorrhage, we can also use oxytocins. Now coming to individual uterine stimulant. So number one is oxytocin. So it is the most important drug which is used. So oxytocin, it is a non-peptide hormone which is synthesized in the supraoptic and paraventricular nuclei of the hypothalamus along with antidiuretic hormones. So they are synthesized in the hypothalamus along with ADS, and they are stored in the neurohypophysis, that is the posterior pituitary, and from there it is secreted. And during parturition, that is during the birth of the baby, and while the baby is suckling the breast, and during the coitus, they also act as a stimulus for releasing the oxytocin, causing the contraction of the pregnant uterus and also causing contraction of the myoepithelial cells of the female breast, leading to milk ejection. So whenever a child they suck the mother's milk, it will stimulate the hypothalamus and it will cause the release of oxytocin. Now coming to mechanism of action of oxytocin. I think there is some background noise. Whose microphone is on? Can you please off it? Okay, thank you. So coming to mechanism of action of oxytocin. So this oxytocin, it binds to the specific G protein coupled oxytocin receptor, which is present in the myometrium, which mediate the response by depolarization of the muscle fiber and influx of calcium ion into the cells, which leads to generation of inositol triphosphate by hydrolysis of phosphoinositide, and there will be release of intracellular release of calcium, and there will be increased synthesis and release of prostaglandin by endometrium, causing contraction of the pregnant uterus. So oxytocin, they usually bind to the G protein couple receptor, and there will be depolarization of the muscles fiber leading to influx of the calcium. There will be calcium entry inside the cells, and when calcium enters inside the cell, it will lead to generation of IP3, and there will be increased release of calcium as well, and it will also cause increased synthesis and release of prostaglandin by endometrium. And when there is increased release of prostaglandin by endometrium, it will lead to contraction of the pregnant uterus. So when uterus is contracted, it will help in expulsion of the fetus during the delivery. So what are the pharmacological actions of oxytocin? So oxytocin will act on various parts of our body. So how does it act on the uterus? So oxytocin, it increases the force as well as frequency of uterine contraction, causing expulsion of the fetus. So oxytocin, when it is used, it will increase the force, and also it will increase the frequency of the uterine contraction. So there will be increase in the force also, and there will be increase in the frequency of the contraction of the uterus, and it will help in expulsion of the fetus. And estrogen, it increases the sensitivity of the uterus to oxytocin, while progesterone, it will decrease the sensitivity of the uterus to uh, sorry, estrogen, it will increase the sensitivity of the uterus to oxytocin, while progesterone will decrease the sensitivity of the uterus to oxytocin. And this oxytocin in non-pregnant uterus, and that during early part of the pregnancy, is resistant to oxytocin. So if oxytocin is given to non-pregnant female or during the early part of the pregnancy, it is resistant. So higher dose are needed to see the action of the oxytocin in case of non-pregnant female or during the early stage of pregnancy. But the sensitivity of the oxytocin, it is increased progressively during the third trimester, that is the last trimester of pregnancy. So in uterus, oxytocin, it will increase the force as well as frequency of the uterine contraction, and the sensitivity of oxytocin, it is usually increased during the later part of the pregnancy, that is during the third trimester of the pregnancy. And during parturition, uterus is also highly sensitive to oxygen, that is during the delivery of the baby, uterus is also highly sensitive to oxytocin. And when oxytocin is given in low dose through intravenous infusion, it causes complete relaxation between the two successive uterine contraction, allowing the refilling of the placental blood vessels by maternal arterial blood, and thus it prevents the fetal asphyxia. So whenever we give oxytocin in the low dose through intravenous infusion, it will lead to contraction of the uterus. Okay, so first the uterus will contract, and then after contraction there will be relaxation in between, and after relaxation again there will be contraction of the uterus. So when it is given low dose, there will be complete relaxation in between the two successive uterine contractions. So during the relaxation period, what happens, there will be refilling of the placental blood vessels by the maternal blood. Okay, so when the maternal blood will go into the placental blood vessels, it will provide oxygen to the baby, and it will prevent the fetal asphyxia. So the advantage of giving oxytocin in low dose is, whenever it is given in low dose through intravenous infusion, there will be a complete relaxation between the two successive uterine contraction, which will allow the refilling of the placental blood vessels by the maternal blood. So patient, then when it is refilled by the maternal blood, then it will prevent the fetal asphyxia because the fetus will get the adequate oxygen through the maternal arterial blood. But when it is given in larger doses, further increase the it will further increase the frequency of uterine contraction, causing incomplete relaxation between them, causing sustained uterine contraction that interfere with the blood flow through placenta, leading to fetal distress, causing asphyxial injury to the baby. So when oxytocin it is given in higher dose, what happens is it will increase the frequency of contractions. So the uterine contraction will be very frequent. Okay, it will be frequently contracted, and there will be no complete relaxation in between the two successive contraction. So when there is no relaxation in between, it will cause the uterine to contract for longer period of time. That is, there will be sustained uterine contraction. So when uterine contraction is sustained for longer time, it will interfere with the blood flow from maternal blood to the fetal blood vessels. So there will be no supply of the oxygen to the fetus. It will cause fetal distress, and there will be asphyxial injury to the baby. Baby will not get adequate oxygen supply, and it will lead to asphyxial injury to the baby. Baby may go to the respiratory arrest, or baby may go into some sorts of brain damage due to lack of oxygen. So now coming to action of oxytocin in the breast. So when oxytocin is given, it will contract the myoepithelial cells of the mammary alveoli, and it will lead to ejection of the milk. So it mediates the milk ejection reflex, okay, which is initiated by suckling by the infant, that stimulates the nipple mechanoreceptor and promotes the release of oxytocin through the posterior pituitary. So when the baby sucks the breast milk, then it will stimulate the nipple mechanoreceptor of the nipple, and it will promote the release of oxytocin through the posterior pituitary. So when oxytocin is released, it will lead to ejection of the milk. Now coming to cardiovascular system. So when the conventional dose of oxytocin is given, it doesn't have any significant effect on blood pressure. But when higher dose is given, it causes vasodilatation, leading to a slight fall in blood pressure, and there may be reflex tachycardia as well as flushing. So oxytocin should always be given starting from the lower dose. So lower, when it is given in lower dose, it doesn't have any significant effect, but when it is given in higher dose, it may cause vasodilatation, hypotension, reflex tachycardia, and flushing. And in kidney, when it is given in higher doses, it exerts antidiuretic hormone like action. So there will be decrease in urine output, there will be sodium and water retention, leading to edema. And it can also cause pulmonary edema if large amount of IV fluid is given together. So whenever oxytocin is given in higher dose, the patient may have decreased urine output, edematous body, and the patient may also go into pulmonary edema due to fluid overload or volume overload if oxytocin is given along with large amount of IV fluid. Coming to pharmacokinetics, it is inactive orally, so it is always administered either intramuscularly or it is given intravenously, and it is rapidly degraded in liver and kidney, and its plasma T half is 6 to 12 minutes. Now, what are the uses of oxytocin? So, number one use of oxytocin is it is helpful in induction of labor. So, labor is induced in post-maturity or in prematurely in toxemia of pregnancy, diabetic mother, rupture membrane, or placental insufficiency. So, what are the cases where you have to induce the labor? So, labor it is induced in post-maturity. If post-maturity means if the fetus is over mature, like after 40 weeks of pregnancy, if the patient is not having any uterine contraction, then you can induce the labor the labor by giving oxytocin, or in prematurely in toxemia of pregnancy means patient pregnant female having hypertension along with seizure. Okay, that is the toxemia of pregnancy. So in those cases, the labor has to be induced early, and in diabetic mother also we can induce the labor, and in case of rupture membrane or if there is placental insufficiency, in those cases we can induce the labor by giving oxytocin, and it will help in contraction of the uterus and help in expulsion of the fetus. So it is usually given by slow IV infusion in a dose of 5 international unit of oxytocin. It is diluted in 500 ml of 5% dextrose. So the dose of oxytocin is 5 international unit, and it is diluted in 500 ml of 5% of dextrose, and it is given at very low rate, started at lower rate, and it is gradually increased according to the response. So we have to keep on watching the contraction of the uterus, and we have to adjust the dose according to the contraction of the uterus. So before infusion of the oxytocin, certain aspects has to be seen, like fetal presentation has to be correct. That means a fetus may present with head, fetus may present with shoulder, fetus may present with foot. Okay, so we have to see the presentation of the fetus, and it has to be correct. So there should always be a vertex presentation. That means fetus has to be present on their head. If there is foot presentation, then it is very difficult to deliver a baby normally. So and if we give oxytocin in foot presentation, what happens, it will the fetal uterus will be keep on contracting it, and when the baby is delivered with the food, then it is very difficult to deliver, because after coming out of the food, the hand will be arrested inside and the delivery may be a little complicated. So before giving oxytocin, we have to see that there should be a vertex presentation. There shouldn't be a bridge presentation. Bridge presentation means presentation with foot. And fetal lung has to be adequately mature. The fetus should be mature enough so that the fetus lung is already mature well. And there should be no placenta previa. That is, the placenta previa means the lower lying of the placenta just above the cervix. Okay, in that case there may be excessive bleeding if there is placenta previa. So we have to see whether there is placenta previa or not, and we have to see there is no fetal distress. So fetal distress is seen by ausculting the abdomen. We have to see the heart rate of the patient. Fetus, we have to see the movement of the fetus, and we can see whether the fetus is in distress or not. And there should be no uterine scar. If patient has delivered before by cesarean section, there will be a uterine scar. And in second pregnancy, while delivering, if we give oxytocin, then what happens, there may be a chance of uterine rupture through the uterine scar. So you have to see if whether there is any uterine scar or not. So during oxytocin infusion, fetal and maternal heart rate should be monitored. Maternal blood pressure and uterine contraction should be monitored. Now, oxytocin, it is the drug of choice for induction of labor. Why? So why do you choose oxytocin for induction of labor? So it is chosen because it has very short plasma T half, that is 6 to 12 minutes. So it has short T half, and intensity of action can be controlled by slow intravenous infusion, and the action can be quickly terminated. So since it has short plasma T half, its action can be controlled by slow infusion, and if needed we can increase the rate of the infusion, and if there is excessive contraction, then we can decrease the rate of infusion, and it can also be quickly terminated. And at low dose, when it is given at low dose, there is complete relaxation between the uterine contraction, which allows the refilling of placental blood vessels by maternal arterial blood, and it prevents the fetal asphyxia. This is also another advantage of giving oxytocin for induction of labor is it will help to prevent the fetal asphyxia when it is given at lower dose, because there is complete relaxation in between the two successive uterine contraction. And when oxytocin is given, the lower uterine segment is not contracted, so fetal descent is not compromised. So whenever oxytocin it is given, it will contract only the lower, as it will contract only the upper portion of the uterus. It will not contract the lower portion of the uterus. It will only contract the fundus part of the uterus, but the cervical part of the uterus is not contracted. So when the lower segment is not contracted, while when there is a descent of the fetus, it will not be compressed. Okay, so the descent of the fetus is not compromised, because when oxytocin is given, it will only contract the upper segment of the uterus, but it will not contract the lower segment of the uterus. So there will be, so the fetal descent is not compromised while giving oxytocin. And uterine contraction can be consequently augmented. We can augment the contraction of the uterus. So these are the advantages, or oxytocin is the drug of choice for induction of labor. Now coming to uterine inertia. So oxytocin can also be given in case of uterine inertia. So uterine inertia, it is the failure of uterus to expel the fetus normally, and is and you during this sorry during uterine inertia, oxytocin it is given in a dose of 2 to 5 international unit, and it is diluted in 500 ml of normal saline, and it can be given very slowly through intravenous route, and it will help to augment the contraction if uterine contraction is feeble and labor is not progressing satisfactory. So uterine inertia, it is a condition of failure of uterus to expel the fetus normally. In this condition, what happened? The contraction of uterus is very feeble, okay, and the labor is not progressing satisfactory, because and the uterus is unable to expel the fetus. So to increase the contraction of the uterus, we give oxytocin so that the fetus is normally delivered. And it should not be used to accelerate the normally progressing labor. So if you see the patient in labor pain and but the uterine contraction is adequate, in such case you should never give oxytocin in such case, because the labor is progressing normally. In such case, if labor is progressing normally and if you are giving oxytocin, then what happens? It will further increase the contraction of the uterus, and there may be rupture of the uterus in such case. So whenever there is normally progressing labor, then you should never give oxytocin, because in normally progressing labor, the uterus will contract normally and it will expel the fetus normally. And if you try to give oxytocin, there will be chance of uterine rupture. Now coming to postpartum hemorrhage and cesarean section. So in postpartum hemorrhage and after cesarean and during the cesarean section also, oxytocin can be given, and oxytocin is given in a dose of 5 international unit. Either it can be given intramuscularly or it can be given intravenous infusion, and it is given for immediate response after placenta is expelled. So after delivery, we have to wait for 2 to 3 minutes after delivery of the baby. You can see the placenta expulsion of the placenta after 2 to 3 minutes of the delivery of the baby, and immediately after placenta is expelled, you can give oxytocin either IM or IV, and it acts by forcefully contracting the uterine muscles, which compresses the blood vessels passing through its meshwork to arrest hemorrhage from the inner surface exposed by placental separation. So what happens after placenta is separated from the uterus and it is expelled? there may be the chances of hemorrhage from the inner surface where the placenta was attached inside the uterus. So to prevent the hemorrhage or to prevent the excessive bleeding from the placental separation, we can give oxytocin, and this oxytocin will contract the uterine muscles, and after uterine muscles is contracted, it will compress the blood vessels. Okay, so when the blood vessels is compressed, then there is less chance of hemorrhage from the inner surface of the placenta. So this oxytocin can be used after to prevent the postpartum hemorrhage, or it can also be given after cesarean section to decrease the blood loss. And oxytocin can also be used for breast engorgement. So when does breast engorgement occurs? It may occur due to insufficient milk ejection reflex. So to cause the milk ejection, we can give oxytocin. If after delivery of the baby, if the female is not ejecting adequate amount of milk, then we can give oxytocin. Now it can also be used to do oxytocin challenge test. So oxytocin challenge test, it is usually done to determine the uteroplacental adequacy in high risk pregnancy. And high risk pregnancy means those pregnant female who are having hypertension with seizure, or those pregnant female who are having diabetic, they are at risk. So we have to do oxytocin challenge test to determine the uteroplacental adequacy. So in this case, oxytocin is given in very low dose till the uterine contraction are elicited every 3 to 4 minutes. So oxytocin is given at starting from the lower dose till we can feel the uterine contraction in every 3 to 4 minutes. And if there is increase in fetal heart rate, that is, if fetal heart rate is very high after we giving oxytocin, it indicates that there is uteroplacental inadequacy. So it can also be given for doing oxytocin challenge test. Now coming to adverse drug reaction of oxytocin. So as I had already told, if it is given in higher dose, it may cause strong uterine contraction causing maternal and fetal soft tissue injury. Or there may be, if higher dose is given, there may be excessive contraction, the frequency of contraction is also increased, so there may be chances of rupture of uterus, and there may be chances of fetal asphyxia due to no blood supply to the placenta from the maternal blood vessels, and there may be asphyxial death of the fetus. And if oxytocin is given in larger dose with along with IV fluids, it may cause water intoxication due to antidiuretic hormone like action, and patient may also develop pulmonary edema, and patient may have respiratory distress, and there may be death of the patient due to volume overload. Now, what are the contraindications of giving oxytocin? So, oxytocin, it is contraindicated in case of cephalopelvic disproportion. Cephalo means head, pelvis. Okay, so if the fetal head is size of the fetal head is bigger than the size of the maternal pelvis, it is known as cephalopelvic disproportion. If by doing ultrasound you can diagnose whether there is cephalopelvic disproportion or not. So if the fetal head is bigger than the size of the maternal pelvis, so in such case we should not give oxytocin, because after if we give oxytocin, it will cause forceful contraction of the uterus, and it will forcefully try the fetus to expel, but it is not possible to expel deliver the fetus through the small pelvis, and there may be chance of soft tissue injury of the fetal head. There may be chances of asphyxial injury leading to death of the fetus. And it should also not be given in case of breech presentation, that is whenever the baby is presented with foot, we shouldn't give oxytocin. And if there is placenta previa, it is contraindicated. And if we see there is fetal distress, we should never give oxytocin. Now coming to this amino oxytocin. So it is a buccal formulation of oxytocin and it is convenient to use, but it is less potent than oxytocin. So, but the best uterine stimulant is the oxytocin. Okay, so this amino oxytocin, it is given to buccal root and it is convenient to use, but it is less potent as compared to oxytocin, and it is also given for induction of labor. It is also given for uterine inertia as well as in case of breast engorgement and to do milk let down, it is given. Okay, so this amino oxytocin, it is given in a dose of 50 international unit as a buccal tablet, and it is repeated every 30 minutes till the desired contraction is obtained. And in case of uterine inertia, it is given in a dose of 25 international unit repeated every 30 minutes. And for milk let down, it is given in a dose of 25 to 50 international units just before breastfeeding. Now coming to another group, that is orgoderivative, which contains orgometrin and methyl orgometrin. So it is also a uterine stimulant. So methyl orgometrin has more selective and more potent effect than orgometrin on the uterus. So in clinical practice, in orgoderivative, we usually prefer methyl orgometrin as a uterine stimulant as compared to orgometrin. So methyl orgometrin, they increase the myometrial contraction involving fundus, the body, and the cervical segment of the uterus. So oxytocin, as I already had told, that when we use oxytocin, it will contract the upper segment of the uterus, that is fundus only, but it doesn't contract the lower segment of the uterus. But methyl orgometrin, it will contract the fundus also, it will contract the body of the uterus also, as well as it will contract the cervical segment of the uterus. Also, it will contract the whole segment of the uterus. And what are the pharmacological actions? So, its pharmacological action of orgoderivative in uterus is it will increase the force, frequency, and duration of uterine contraction. So, all force, frequency, and duration of contraction is increased by orgoderivative, and they stimulate upper and lower segment, both the upper and lower segment of the uterus. And when it is given at low dose, contractions are phasic with normal relaxation in between. So as in case of oxytocin, here also when it is given at low dose, the contraction is phasic. That means there is complete relaxation in between the two successive contractions. But when orgometrin are given at higher doses, the contraction become more powerful and raises the resting tone, and the uterus passes into the state of sustained tonic contraction, causing uterine tetany. So when this is given at lower dose, there will be complete relaxation in between two successive contractions, but when it is given at higher dose, the contraction becomes more powerful, more strong, and it will raise the resting tone, and uterus, there will be sustained tonic contraction of the uterus, causing the uterine tetany. There will be no relaxation there, and uterus will be contracted for longer duration of time. Okay, and in therapeutic doses, they will increase the blood pressure, but it is not that significant. And for gastrointestinal tract, when higher dose is given, it will increase the intestinal peristalsis. Now, kinetics of orgometrin, they are given orally or can be given parenterally, metabolized in liver and excreted in urine. And onset of action is when it is given through oral route, it is 15 minutes. When it is given intramuscularly, it is 5 minutes. And when it is given through intravenous route, onset of action is almost immediately. And plasma half-life is 1 to 2 hours. And effect of single dose will last for 3 to 4 hours. Now coming to therapeutic uses of orgometrin as well as methyl orgometrin. So it is mostly given for prevention of postpartum hemorrhage as well as for treatment of PPH. So Dose is 0.2 to 0.3 milligram of methyl orgometrin, and it is given after delivery of the anterior soldier or after expulsion of the placenta for prophylaxis of PPS. So it is usually given after delivery of the anterior soldier, or it is given immediately after expulsion of the placenta, so that there will be no postpartum hemorrhage. But if there is already postpartum hemorrhage occurring, then 0.5 milligram of methyl orgometrin is given intravenously. And if there is excessive bleeding, or if there is severe bleeding, then oxytocin and orgometrin are given in combination, and orgometrin is given at a dose of 0.5 milligram, and oxytocin is given for in a dose of 5 international unit, either intramuscularly or intravenously. So orgometrin and methyl orgometrin are given for treatment of postpartum hemorrhage, and it is also given after cesarean section, or it is also given after instrumental delivery. Like if during delivery, if we are using some sorts of instrument like forceps, uh, etc., then we can also give orgometrin and methyl orgometrin to prevent the uterine atony and to control the bleeding. So during the instrumental delivery, there is chances of excessive bleeding. So to control the excessive bleeding, we can also give orgot derivative, and it is also given to ensure normal involution. Involution means coming back of the uterus to the normal size. Okay, so during pregnancy, the size of the uterus is increased, and after delivery, within few weeks, the size of the uterus will gradually decrease and comes towards the normal. So that is known as normal involution. To ensure the normal involution, 0.125 milligram of orgometrin or methyl orgometrin is given 3 times a day orally for 7 days. Now coming to mechanism of action or orgometrin. So this orgometrin, they cause sustained tonic contraction of the uterus. So they will contract the uterus for longer duration of time, and there will be complete sustained, the contraction will be sustained for longer time. Okay, so they cause sustained tonic contraction of the uterus, and uterine vessels are compressed by myometrial workup and breathing stuff. So there will be no relaxation in between when there is sustained tonic contraction. So when the tone of the contraction is sustained for longer time, it will compress the underlying blood vessels, and when the blood vessels are compressed, there will be no bleeding. So this is how orgometrin acts. Now coming to adverse drug reaction, it causes nausea, vomiting, increase in blood pressure in case of hypertensive patient, and when it is used for longer time, may cause gangrene of the fingers and toes due to vasoconstrictor. If it will cause the blood vessels to constrict, so if it is used for longer duration of time, there may be gangrene formation in the fingers as well as toes, and it will interfere with lactation due to inhibition of release of prolactin from the pituitary, and it is contraindicated in case of heart diseases, hypertension, myocardial infarction, coronary vascular diseases, as well as angina pectoris. Now coming to uterine stimulant, that is prostaglandins. So prostaglandin E2, F2 alpha is used. So prostaglandin E2 and its synthetic analog is dinoprostone, and prostaglandin F2 and its synthetic analog is carboprost, and prostaglandin E1 and its analog misoprostol are used as a potent uterine stimulant, and they are used in the later part of the pregnancy and to cause the cervical ripening. That is, these prostaglandin are used during the third trimester. At the end of the third trimester, it is used, and to cause the cervical ripening means, whenever we give prostaglandin, it will make the cervix very soft, so that there will be easy dilatation of the cervix. That is known as cervical ripening. So it is used in later part of the pregnancy to cause the ripening of the cervix. Now coming to uterine relaxant. So uterine stimulant are known as uterotonics, whereas uterine relaxant are known as tocolytics. So these are the drugs that decreases the contraction of the uterus. So oxytocics, they increase the contraction of the uterus, whereas tocolytics, they will decrease the contraction of the uterus. And these tocolytics or uterine relaxant, they are used to delay the pregnancy or to postpone the labor or to arrest the threatened abortion. For example, they are used to delay the labor if patient is experiencing premature contraction of the uterus before the time of the delivery. Like if patient is experiencing uterine contraction during 30 to 34 weeks of pregnancy, in such case we can use tocolytics to delay the or postpone the labor. Okay, so uterine relaxant are: number one, beta adrenergic agonists like salbutamol, ritodrine, terbutaline, isosuprin. These are the tocolytics. Another group of drug is magnesium sulfate, and in calcium channel blocker, nifedipine is also used as a tocolytics, and oxytocin antagonists like atosiban can be used, and prostaglandin synthesis inhibitors like indomethacin, mefenamic acid, and aspirin can also be used as a uterine relaxant. Now, how does beta adrenergic agonist act as a tocolytics? So they act by binding to beta receptor present on the myometrium, and they will activate the adenyl cyclase. So after activating the adenyl cyclase, there will be increase in cyclic AMP, which will activate the cyclic AMP dependent protein kinase. So there will be decrease in intracellular concentration of the calcium. So whenever there is decreased calcium concentration, there will be muscles relaxation. So for contraction of any smooth muscles, calcium is needed, but beta adrenergic agonists, they will cause decrease in the concentration of calcium, leading to muscles relaxation. So it is usually started as 50 microgram intravenous infusion, and rate is increased slowly every 10 minutes till the uterine contraction is ceases or maternal heart rate rises to 120 per minute. So it is given with started with a low dose, and it is gradually, the dose is gradually increased every 10 minutes until the uterine contraction is stopped, and contraction are then suppressed by giving 10 milligram intramuscularly 4 times a day for 2 days. And as a side effect, it causes palpitation, tremor, nausea. It may cause hyperglycemia, hypokalemia, and hypotension. Coming to magnesium sulfate. So magnesium sulfate, it acts by competing with calcium ion for entry into myometrium through both voltage gated as well as ligand gated calcium channels. So it will compete with calcium for entry into the cell. So high risk to be used as a tocolytics. Magnesium sulfate is not commonly used as a tocolytics because it has higher risks and it can cause increase in perinatal mortality. So it may cause mortality of the fetus as well as mother. So it is not recommended commonly for uterine relaxation. Okay, but magnesium sulfate is a drug of choice in case of preeclampsia in eclampsia. That means if the pregnant female is having hypertension along with seizure, in that case, magnesium sulfate is a drug of choice for treatment of seizure in case of preeclampsia and eclampsia, but it is not commonly recommended as a uterine relaxant because of its perinatal mortality. Coming to calcium channel blocker, that is nifedipine. So nifedipine, it acts by inhibiting the influx of calcium ion into the myometrial cell. Since it is a calcium channel blocker, it will block the calcium channel and it will decrease the entry of calcium into the myometrium so that there will be muscles relaxation. So dose of nifedipine is 10 milligram Oral dose, it is given every 30 minutes till the contraction subsides, and after subsiding of the contraction it is followed by 10 milligram oral tablet, and it is given 4 times a day for uterine relaxation, and side effect is tachycardia as well as hypotension. Now coming to oxytocin antagonist, that is atosiban. So atosiban, it blocks oxytocin receptor of the uterus. Since it is the oxytocin antagonist, it will block the oxytocin receptor that is present in the uterus, and it will inhibit the release of the calcium intracellularly, and it will inhibit the release of prostaglandin and thereby inhibit the myometrial contraction. So it will release the calcium, it will inhibit the release of calcium, it will inhibit the release of prostaglandin, and it will thereby it will inhibit the contraction of the uterus, and it suppresses the premature contraction of the uterus, and it will postpone the preterm delivery, and it is also given by intravenous infusion. Coming to another drug, that is prostaglandin synthesis inhibitor like indomethacin, mefenamic acid, aspirin, etc. So this drug inhibit the synthesis of prostaglandin, and thereby it will decrease the intracellular calcium, and it inhibit the uterine contraction. So it will not allow the uterus to contract, because they will inhibit the entry of the calcium into the cells. But it is not used commonly to delay the labor, as it causes premature closure of ductus arteriosus with pulmonary hypertension. So these prostaglandin synthesis inhibitor are not commonly used for the treatment of, sorry, it is not commonly used as a uterine relaxant, because if we use this drug it will cause premature closure of the ductus arteriosus, and this drug may cause pulmonary hypertension. So these drugs are not preferred as a uterine relaxant. Now coming to other tocolytics like halothane and progesterone. So halothane, it is a efficacious uterine relaxant that has been used as the anesthetic when external or internal version is attempted. So what do you mean by external version and internal version? So when you examine a pregnant lady, and when you see uh, when you want to see the position of the baby, or when you want to see the presentation of the baby, whether the baby is presented with vertex, or whether the baby is presented with breech presentation. If the baby is in breech presentation, what we can do is we can change the presentation of the baby by giving halothane. So when halothane is given, it will cause the relaxation of the uterus, so that it is easy for anesthetics to make an attempt to do external or internal version of the baby. Like external version means the anesthetics will try to rotate the baby externally from the abdomen. Okay, try to fix the baby into the vertex presentation by rotating the baby externally through the abdomen. And internal version means one hand of the anesthetic will be through the cervix, and another hand will be through the abdominal wall, and through cervix, and through the support of external hand, the anesthetic will try to rotate the baby and fix the baby into the vortex presentation. So halothane can be used as a uterine relaxant for the external or internal version of, to attempt the external or internal version of the baby. And another drug is progesterone. Progesterone has a relaxant effect in uterus, and it is used in case of threatened abortion. Threatened abortion means bleeding during the um, pregnancy period. So there may be a threat to the patient, and in such case we can give progesterone, so that the uterine muscles will be relaxed and bleeding will be stopped. So these are the other tocolytics that can be used as during the contraction of the uterus. Okay, so that's all for tocolytics and oxytocics. So that's it.